Everything rises and falls on leadership. The ability to lead well is fueled by living your cause and purpose. This podcast will equip you with the tools to do just that. Live and lead with cause and purpose. And now, author of the book, The Anatomy of Leadership, and our host, Chris Como.
Hello and welcome. Welcome to The Anatomy of Leadership. Our guest today is John Locke. John, you are our very first guest on the Anatomy of Leadership podcast. And so it's our second podcast. The first one was just me. John's an executive coach at Forvis, and he's also a longtime good friend. In fact, I could think of no better person I wanted to kick off the Anatomy of Leadership podcast with. John's done some incredible stuff. He's co-created, implemented a vision of his as an internal executive coach. He's created a coaching practice at what at the time was Dixon Hughes Goodman. A lot of us know them as DHG. They're now Forvis. They're a top 10 accounting firm. He has also two other coaches that serve over 400 partners throughout Forvis' nationwide footprint. And interestingly, Forvis recently announced that they're expanding internationally and they'll be renamed. And so they're creating a partnership merger with Forvis Mazars. And so that's in June of this year. Also, a little bit more in his bio, John's a co-founder and current leader of the International Coach Federations of Western North Carolina subchapter. John is an ICF, so he's a real deal coach, ICF Credentialed Professional Certified Coach. He's a board member of ICF in Charlotte, and he holds the WBECS Conversational Intelligence Coaching Certification. He's also a medical board credentialed health and wellness coach, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in a bit. And his recent pursuits also include certification in actualized leadership and something we're really fond of in Teleas, which is positive intelligence. And just a great guy. John, is there anything I missed in your background or bio?
You know, Chris, I think that's pretty comprehensive for this time together today. And all I would add to that is I have a love for leadership, development, and people. And I think if there's probably one other thing that I would add to my life journey, it's where I get my rewards. And that's really connecting really good people to do great things. And so that's kind of my passion and part of what led me into the coaching world.
And John, I've known you for a while. In fact, that's our Jerry Maguire moment with each other was when I think it was Meredith Elliott Powell that connected you and I think that's right.
Yeah, I think so.
But anyway, our immediate was like leadership, and we have a bunch of other common interests, faith interest, etc. But we were like mano to mano, we're talking about leadership. And John, your superpower, you are unlike anyone. You're a major connector. Like I've just one reason why I love having you in my life is anything I'm kind of ideating on. I know if I reach out to you, you're going to know someone in that realm, and so it's part of your superpower.
Thanks. Well, I love trying.
Well, so John, I'm using the framework for the podcast. So my book that came out, The Anatomy of Leadership. Thank you. You gave me an endorsement for that book. And
Absolutely.
I wrote the book like a table of contents, effectively. I mean, you know, kind of how boneheaded am I? The concept of leadership, you Google the word, you get over 6 billion hits. It might be up to 7 billion by today. And I thought if I'm going to write a book, I'm going to try to create like a superstructure. I'm an accountant by trade. So I try to organize stuff, right? Try to create a taxonomy. So in some respects, that's really why I wrote the book. And so the vision of our podcast is we'll use that table of contents because I knew in writing this book, it would be 10 miles wide, if you will, but not so much deep. So the idea of the podcast is to keep going deep. So what you and I are going to talk about today is the very first chapter of the book, which is self-mastery. And immediately I literally took each chapter and like, who's the best person I know in this category? And like John Locke, no question, on self-mastery. So John, you even went and studied, I believe it's called the Human Performance Institute. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a good place to start. What is that place and what does your learning there have to do with the concept of self-mastery?
Well, that was a great start for me on this journey of understanding really the dynamics of the human condition and things around performance. But it was a wonderful program. They were based in Orlando, Florida. They had a very difficult time during COVID. Johnson & Johnson purchased them years ago. they were training corporate executives all around the world in a 3-day program that was based on really people understanding and spending time. And the first full day is we spent an entire day talking about defining our purpose, and had some really intense homework to try to distill down what was important to each of us. And then once we did that, then we started looking at this model that they had created around what they called the energy pyramid, which was the 4 disciplines of energy. And it started at the bottom with your physical energy, followed by emotional, and then mental and spiritual at the top. And so they taught this really very cool concept, and very identifiable, in that we develop as human beings from the bottom of this pyramid, from the physical. We're born into this world with not much else other than just our physical presence. But we develop over time, emotionally, and then mentally, and then at some point in time, hopefully spiritually. And one of the things that I really loved about this whole concept is that it wasn't something that if you didn't have a spiritual immediate connection, in other words, you didn't really have a strong faith and weren't practicing, in a religious standpoint, they defined that really as your purpose. Why are you here on earth, and what are you doing that's making a difference, and why do you get up every day? What's important to you? So we spent time learning about the impact of the investments that we make and some of the things that we take for granted around each of those 4 levels of the pyramid. And that just really opened my eyes dramatically to the opportunity to help people really understand themselves at a different level. When you think about the term self-mastery, it's really, what are you doing with yourself, for yourself, to make yourself really the best version of yourself.
That actually sounds an awful lot. Maybe it's when you write a book, you're like, I don't know where I begin and someone else ends. In fact, I've thought about this, John. I have a feeling, so this is an article, I think at one of our very first breakfasts, the corporate athlete article, which is so funny because Meredith Elliott Powell gives me credit of introducing her to it. And I'm thinking, I don't know if that was me or John, because I think it went from John to me, maybe to her. Yeah. And I'll think you'll love this. And now she's using this with hospice executives all over the country as well. And just using that kind of pyramid. And so that's what I love about great wisdom, right? Yeah. Just like we impact each other. Say the 2 things in life that change you, the books you read and the people that you meet.
Absolutely.
The other thing, John, in what you just said, I'm reminded of our mutual friend, Dr. Lee Thayer. I'm going to quote him quite a bit, I know, in this podcast. But Lee used to get people together in multiple disciplines. He used to have a conference, and it's, I think, very similar to something Jordan Peterson is doing now, like literally get the best and brightest minds and just get them intersecting and interacting with each other. And there's some really cool transdisciplinary things that actually occur. So you're coming at this from a corporate athlete standpoint with that pyramid. I don't know if you know this, but hospice was one of the first healthcare entities built with the belief that human beings are body, mind, spirit, socio-emotional component. That's actually why hospices have a interdisciplinary group of clinicians, doctors, nurses, social workers, chaplains, CNAs, volunteers. And the idea is this transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary group comes around the patient and family, and then you're looking at them holistically based upon a very similar pyramid. And so it's kind of sad, though, to think that, you have to wait to your end of life to get that kind of amazing health care. But the fact that you are bringing this into the corporate world to help people, it sounds a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which we quote quite a bit in the work that we do. And so does any comments to any of that, John? Because it feels like there's just a lot of interesting synergy. I think we're all tapping from an interesting, similar well of wisdom, but just maybe, it's not, I don't think hospice created the energy pyramid. Right. I think it's just, I think we actually tapped into a well of wisdom similar to the well of wisdom that Human Performance Institute and you and others are using now.
What's interesting is that, I think healthcare in general has been, searching for things outside of just the traditional disciplines of giving people pills to make them better. And we've seen how broken the healthcare model is relating to preparing people to physically live a rewarding and somewhat healthy life. We're about fixing people. So the thing that I love about the hospice model is that they've recognized how important all of these elements are. In fact, I was just doing some research prior to our session today, and this is relatively new data. But if you go back and look at what the Surgeon General just came out with last year around loneliness, and the statistics are staggering around,
Yes.
he calls it the epidemic. In fact, I wrote it down. He called it the epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And what his research is telling him is that this is people who are lonely and isolated have anywhere between 30 and 50% more a probability to get a chronic disease and are 60% more likely to die prematurely.
Yeah.
Now,
wow. Well, that's incredible.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is recent stuff. And look what we just went through with the pandemic. So what you and your hospice leaders have identified is that, this is going to play an important role. But now, to your point, why aren't we doing this earlier in people's lives and raising their level of awareness to? And this is just one. This is the mental, emotional side. There's still the physical, spiritual side of this. So there's so much here, so much rich information and opportunity for us to help people really get through difficult times. And, when we talk about corporate careers and things like that, it's important. But, we're actually talking about people's lives. And when you see that kind of data, it's like this is getting real really quick.
And we're getting we're poking on something that is a very big issue. John, I don't know if you know this. And so there actually is a minister of loneliness in England. And there's a group of us who are actually going to go to England this year and meet with top hospice and palliative care leaders. And that's actually one of the things on the agenda. There's now a nonprofit, our National Association of Hospice and Palliative Care, actually has like a sub nonprofit that they're working with that's kind of focused on loneliness in the United States. So yeah, you're really poking on something there. So this brilliant framework of this pyramid, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, great well of wisdom. Again, I'll quote Dr. Thayer quite a bit. He would use a term called necessity, John, and I remember I used to hear him say that. Of course, always remember that necessity is the mother of invention. I now understand that at a much deeper level. Like, okay, I get the energy pyramid framing. Been there, got the t-shirt, got the task. Great piece of wisdom, but yet living your life in such a way where you are tapping into all of those wells of wisdom is still a little bit the road less traveled. And I don't know if you would agree or disagree. And I think necessity probably plays into that. What do you think?
Yeah, that gets into a complicated set of variables, but I guess I would distill it down to another term that Dr. Thayer used in cause and purpose. When he talked a lot about that. I think that a lot of what we're dealing with today, all the distractions, the mixed messaging, the mixed priorities that people are dealing with and trying to rationalize, are a symptom of people not really identifying their purpose. It's kind of that simple. I mean, if you have you're really dialed in on who you are as it relates to who you are meant to be, and the positive intelligence world, one of the great frameworks that they've come up with is the SAGE mindset of who you were always meant to be. And I just love that. When you think about, Chris, who were you always meant to be, from being a little guy, a toddler, and coming up through the ranks of, teenager rebellion time and all that. But yet at the core of who you are, who were you meant to be? And you tap into that in moments. What we don't do is we don't tie that into then our greater purpose. And if we can actually create that opportunity to create connection between the best of who we were always meant to be and our purpose, then we're able to stay on really more of a linear track towards a rewarding existence here in this world, and not only for us, but for the people that we impact.
That's so good, John. I've listened to a couple of podcasts preparing for you, and one that you were on, and I think it was you or might have been the podcast host, said that we're we're not human doings, we're human beings. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And so I'm going to say something. I want to see if this resonates with you. It's my way of trying to package what you just said. Tapping into getting understanding and clarity of your cause and purpose, which is a bit of a journey, almost a wrestling match. Jacob wrestled with God. I think there's a lot of interesting symbiology in that. Through that and the greater clarity you get on that, then it brings necessity for you then to tap into that energy pyramid. And Dr. Thayer used to say something that's just coming to me at this moment. He'd say, when you get your cause and purpose, it's got you by the short hairs. I'm like, what does he mean by that?
Yeah.
I think that's what he meant, is that when you start to get clarity over that. Now, there is a shadow side, and I actually wrote about this in my book, because I used to hear and think, almost like the old Charlton Heston 10 Commandments, Moses is going to come down from the mountain and your cause and purpose is going to be on a tablet. It's not quite like that. And I love what you said earlier. Like if I did a reflective exercise over my life, I would start to see these elements. It's actually why I have hardwired a practice now. We talked about that in our podcast that just went out at the end of 2023 about one word. And like every year now at the end of the year, I will take a day and I just wrestle with cause and purpose. I look through the rearview mirror and then try to look back out of the windshield. And the best way I know how to describe it is that wrestling match over life is like looking through a telescope where it's kind of blurry and it gets clearer and clearer. And the greater clarity that you have, then you're able to literally utilize that, focus that, almost use it as a litmus test on a day-to-day basis where you're spending time, etc. Would you clean any of that up or say it differently?
I first of all, I agree with it. There's no question that that's the framework that's very real and needs to be acknowledged. I think the difficult part of that is we are not intentional in, one, recognizing how important that is, and two, creating priorities for ourselves to address that. And so in the framework that they taught in the corporate athlete program, they said that, we develop as human beings from the bottom up, but we become our best self from the top of the pyramid down. And that's how we really hardwire energy into our life to create the opportunity for us to become really the best version of ourselves.
I want you to say that again. It feels like profound. So we develop ourselves from the bottom up. Well, just say that one more time.
Okay.
That was
so
profound.
we develop as human beings from the bottom up, from the physical, emotional, mental, and then eventually spiritual at some level. But when we look at the opportunity for us to create the best version of ourselves, we need to be intentional about how we develop from the top of the pyramid down. So we have to start with the spiritual, or cause and purpose. And then we look at then the opportunity to go back down through it mentally, emotionally, and physically and work on each of those disciplines so that we are taking better control of who we are in these moments. We are being strategic about how we're treating ourselves and how we're then treating and developing others around us and the impact that we're having. And so the interesting part about that pyramid is that if we don't take care of ourselves spiritually, we can do the work in mental and emotional and physical areas, and we're still not going to feel great about ourselves. Just interesting. Yeah.
That's some solid gold there, John. I hope we're going to pinpoint that part of because I think people are going to want to come back to that over and over again. One thing that I was preparing and I thought about you last night. I was reading an interesting article. This is a quote from Aristotle. And so Aristotle said the idea that human beings are fallen creatures, yet they partake of the divine, almost like there's this like duality, within a person. And you've heard many times, I've seen memes now. My kids have taught me this past year about the power of memes. It's like modern day poetry in a way, or allegory poetry, all of kind of together. And so the Native Americans got the white dog and the black dog on the shoulder, and the punchline is like, which one wins? What's the one that you feed the most?
Yeah.
Well, where I'm going with this is that I love everything that you said. It's like, but yet there is this warring nature within us. I want to be the best version of myself. I want to live my cause and purpose. And one thing that I heard you mention in a recent podcast that it hit me, there are a lot more people working from home. It's one of the positive sides of COVID, potentially. TCN is a virtual organization. I've got team members live in Arizona, live in Tennessee, live in Utah. So we're a virtual organization. Now, a really smart guy named Elon Musk says that's impossible. But yet I'm trying to build, and we actually won Modern Healthcare Best Places to Work, but I'm keenly aware of this struggle. And just in full transparency, I choose to go to an office because the discipline does me good. The challenge of working from your home, people want to work from home, but can they bring that discipline to be the best version of themselves? Or is the gravitational pull of, well, I could just go sit on my couch and maybe binge watch Netflix between these two meetings or something.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to comment on that, John. Do you think there's some truth to that?
That is such a huge topic. I wish we had an entire podcast just for that because it is so big, Chris. So let me see if I can distill this down into a couple components. One would be, I think that what we have learned after what we've experienced in the last 3 or 4 years is that there is a huge hole in most people's world when it comes to the need for community. So for those that choose to work virtually, even the most introverted people need a certain level of community to exist. And I don't know if you're familiar with the blue zone studies over the years.
Yeah.
There's like 9 blue zones in the world, and they studied all of these communities, and there's this healthy, thriving, really minute communities that exist, and they have common ingredients. Obviously some of them have to do with the way they're eating and exercise and things like that. But one of the overriding elements in the success of these blue zone communities in totally different parts of the world is that they were so committed to a community, to investing in their community. So how does that translate into today's society? Well, you can work from home and you can be successful from home, but boy, do you have to really be intentional about what it's going to take for you to be a healthy version of yourself. And it's going to take intentional interaction and developing relationships with some community outside of the 4 walls and your computer screen. Because at some point in time, that's not going to go well. There are maybe 0.5% who can do that, and they'll tell all these great stories about, I work 10 hours a day in front of my computer and I'm the happiest person in the world. Good for you. But the 99.5% are struggling, and that's why we could spend another 10 minutes talking about the mental health crisis associated with this. My gosh, have we stepped in it when it comes to mental health? And that's a contributing factor. But I think that if you could take one thing, it's that we don't value the impact of developing community, and if we don't start reestablishing that as a priority, we're in for a long haul as a society and as even a business community in getting people to productive, happy, healthy future lives.
Well, once again, I'm reminded what I loved about Dr. Thayer. Number one, he was an idealist, but number two, he read across the centuries and even the millennia. So he would pull stories from like the Roman Empire or some type of just obscure kind of culture in sub-micro Indonesia that I never heard of before. But one of the things he would talk about is that the power of like a community and storytelling in the community and how it created necessity amongst each other, like the stories that they told, the traditions that they had. And so, and I read something the other day, and I'm going to mess up the quote, but we think about anything from antiquity, almost we have a hubris. Well, we're so technologically advanced, and so those things don't apply to us. But yet, we're using technology to create some type of traditions, some type of cultural norms, and it's like a sieve. It's lacking so much, is what I'm hearing you say. I'm loving what you're saying too, because it's also a little bit of affirming. We've been doing a lot of interesting things within TCN, like it's just kind of a funny, but it's called virtual water cooler, and it's on our calendars, and literally people just pop in, and I made a joke the other day because I strategically didn't pop in till the last 2 minutes because I'm like, when the CEO walks by the water cooler, like, crap, we got to get back to work, and I did it in that way purposefully because it made everybody laugh because they were like, if we really were at the water cooler, is probably what would occur. And so we're trying to be intentional to create some culture and some community. But then we also encourage our people to be involved in their local community because you gotta have still that tangible way that you are interacting. So there's so much richness. The other interesting thing, John, what you just said, I think I shared this with you before. I was working on my master's in gerontology when I was first in healthcare because I felt like these nurses were like, you're an accountant. Whatever you say, we just dismiss. And I'm like, well, damn, I need to have some credibility with these folks. So I started to go through gerontology, but ended up dropping out after a year because I saw this interesting convergence of two rivers. One river was the anti-aging pill, and the other river was healthy aging, what you talked about, eating right, exercise, keeping your mind active. And I saw you start to see the preponderance of the literature towards the anti-aging pill. And I thought, man, as Americans, we're going to go anti-aging pill because it's just the road less traveled. And the reason why I bring that up is there's always this duality struggle. I want to be a better version. New year, you and I, this is actually airing in January. I hope everybody's still on track for their New Year's resolutions, new year, new me. And then those bad habits want to start to seep back in. And then a lot of the pop culture around us is actually going towards the easy thing or the not so healthy thing. And so does that resonate as well, John? Because I think you're so right about community, but there's so many influences and chutes and ladders that are trying to pull us away from being the better version of ourselves.
Yeah, and I don't want to minimize the struggle associated with doing this in an intentional, proactive, healthy manner. I mean, it's a battle, but we do have to make some decisions as to really what's more important to us. As we are defining our purpose, it's like we got to decide what's really important to me right now. Do I want to be healthy, going into my 70s, 80s, et cetera? We can't guarantee that. But what am I doing right now to at least give me a advantage to potentially have a healthier, more enjoyable later stage of life? And I'll tell you, and if I had to, and I was thinking about this because you had mentioned some takeaways for today, right? And I was trying to think, what could I come up with to encourage people around just this? Because it's overwhelming, all of the things that we're trying to manage, and we just can't figure out where to start. And so one of the things so I came up with just 3 things that maybe we could leave our listeners and viewers with today that might be beneficial for them to think about as whether you do New Year's resolutions or not. It's really immaterial. It's about what's important for you to make the changes that are going to be important for you and your family and your life satisfaction. And so one of the things, and the top one was re-engage. And so simply re-engage with the people that are most important in your life, in your community. Reach out to people unexpectedly. I love the whole concept of expressing gratitude regularly. Think of people in your life who've impacted you. Call them out of the blue and say, let me tell you how much you have meant to me. And I did one of those yesterday. I got to walk the talk. I'm preaching this every day, and I thought, I haven't told anybody how important they are in my life. So I called someone who's been incredibly important. I hadn't talked to him in 9 months, and I even work with them. How's that? 9 months. And I said, you just need to know this. You've made a huge difference in my life over the years, and I just had a few days to reflect on that over the holidays, and it was like it kind of stopped him, and he just went, "Wow, well, thank you," because you really made my day, and I'm like, well, you need to know that. So those types of things are not only good for us, but they just really recenter others as well. So re-engage. So the other one is around refueling. We need to figure out how we can be more strategic and how we're going to take care of ourselves as far as refueling. Now, part of this, there's some areas here. One is just, looking at what we're eating every day and how often we're eating, how much we're eating. And we don't want to get into a whole podcast on nutrition, but the reality is we are overeating as a society. We are obese as a society. And because we're so inactive in combination with that, there's an NIH study that was done a few years ago with the sedentary lifestyle component of this. And the NIH study with 200,000 people proved that we're on average 6 to 8 hours of sitting a day is comparable to smoking a pack of cigarettes. And so it's like, who doesn't smoke 6 to 8 hours a day? And even folks like maybe you and I who like to exercise regularly, that doesn't even make up for it. So we have got to move, and we can refuel our body with food, but we can refuel it with physical energy as well. So get up, move, eat right, pay attention to what you're eating, and hydrate. Those little things like that can make a big difference during the day because we're eating junk food. And then the big one in this is recover. So re-engage, refuel, and recover. And here's what I've learned just in the last couple of years is that sleep is one of the most undervalued elements of our human condition right now. Everybody talks about food. Everybody talks about exercise. How many things do you get on your news feed every day about sleep? Rare, right? However, it is being identified as really the X factor in people's health. And getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, most people, and the average American gets 6 hours and 20 minutes. The highest performing individuals in our society get 8 hours and 27 minutes of sleep. How can we allow those non-REM and REM cycles to fully do their job for our mental, cognitive processing as well as our physical health? If we will allow them to do that, we're going to have a much better day the next day. We all know that we don't do well without sleep. Most people don't. Some people, they'll brag about 5 hours. But those people are also headed down a dark path because they don't really understand what that's doing to their physical metabolic condition over time. So things like that, I think, are just an important takeaway from today. And that's simply think about how important it is to re-engage, how important it is to refuel, and how important it is to have strategic recovery, not only through sleep, but even throughout the day, and take breaks and get outside and, take forest bath walks. I love that term, a forest bath. And we have the privilege and opportunity of doing that here in the mountains of Western North Carolina pretty often. But we just need to step back, slow down, and look at this in a little bit of a more objective fashion. And I think we can turn the tide.
Thank you to our Anatomy of Leadership sponsor, Delta Care RX. Delta Care RX is also the title sponsor for our April and November 2024 Leadership Immersion courses. Delta Care RX is primarily known as a national hospice PBM and prescription mail order company. Delta Care RX is a premier vendor of TCN and provides not only pharmaceutical care, but also niche software innovations that save their customers time, stress, and money. Thank you, Delta Care RX, for all the great work that you do in end-of-life and serious illness care.
That's really good, John. I think we actually brought you, it was after 2020, we brought you to one of our leadership development institutes, and I just was a brain tattoo when you said sitting is the new smoking. And I went immediately, I got myself a standing desk. Now, honestly, it's not within the last 6 months that I actually rearranged my workspace. Really cool tactic I learned at the student group is every year before Christmas, clean your office. And each year I've also started to redesign my office. And so now I've redesigned it because some people will just pop up their standing desk. I find shifting locations, it puts me in a different mindset. Like it just creates a better habit. And so that's really cool. And then it's so cool you said that. My wife was tweaking me last night. So of course, I'm my Fitness Pal, I'm tracking my calories. And I'd never thought this is so simple. She's like, okay, what are your calories per day? She goes, all right, divided by 4. 3 of those are your meals, and the 4th is a snack that you could then break the snack into a couple of places. And I'm like, that is so easy, and I can't believe I never thought about that before. And so it's allowed me to then just kind of sprinkle salt and pepper my snacks throughout the day because I found I got home at the end of the day and I'm just famished, and then I screwed up my calories by the end of the day. But by pacing myself that way, that was just such a great tip from my wife. So to me, that goes directly. So re-engage, refuel, recover. Yeah. That's brilliant. John, final thoughts.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and your passion for this whole field of leadership. And I use you as an example to folks in my coaching when I talk about leaders who are not satisfied with the destination, who are always on the journey to get better, to learn so they can share with others. And so I wanted to share that with you, that you're my role model for that. And I use, your discipline and your passion in my discussion with a lot of the executives that I coach. And just as a final wrap, all that I would like to really share with people is that it's not too late to make the changes and to create new routines and habits that are going to potentially transform your life. And I had this conversation with a person I was coaching yesterday who was pushing back on all this, and I said, you know what? Maybe it's not for you, the benefit. I said, but how old are your children? And he said, well, 7 and 9. I said, so what if you were able to make these changes and your children watched you make these changes and you were able to model this and you see 15 years from now how they benefit from that? How meaningful could that be? So if you aren't going to do it for yourself, get healthy, or take the time to develop your purpose, or all the things we talked about today, do it for those that are important to you in your life.
That is brilliantly coached, John, because you took them to cause and purpose. I remember Dr. Thayer used to always say, he's like, someone's diagnosed with lung cancer and they still won't quit smoking. And he would ask us, why is that? And I would just wrestle with that quandary. But you saw in some way like, well, maybe improving myself is not exactly my cause and purpose, but you took them to something probably closer to the center of it to create that necessity. That's well played. The other thing that just hits me just like a ton of bricks, I always find it fascinating. I grew up in the business world, Fortune 500, KPMG, Pete Marwick, but I ended up in hospice.
Yeah.
And I always ask myself, because I look through the rearview mirror, I'm like, God, out of all of the things I could have done with my life, and it is almost like the path chose me, and that's common amongst many people in this movement of hospice. And so when we say that, it really is about the journey, not the destination. If someone is in hospice for 6 months, the death is only a small part of that journey.
Yeah.
But those last 6 months and the life review that occurs and the family relationships sometimes are healed, it is a beautiful microcosm. But golly, you don't have to wait to the very end of your life to truly live. Many people are died at 85. Yet they're buried at 85, but they were kind of dead at 30.
Yeah.
And so I just want to stress what you just said. It's about the journey, not the destination. Enjoy the ride. Even the crappy stuff is sometimes the stuff that defines who we are today, the toughest challenges. There's so many examples that you and I we could do a whole nother show probably just on those circumstances. And then the last thing, John, I want to express gratitude for you. You have been a great friend, a great mentor. Why I love hanging out with you is every time I walk away, I'm better in some respects. And those are the type of people I love hanging out with. So thanks for how you continue to pour into me and so many other leaders. Partners in an accounting firm, high-level, brilliant people, but probably more valued quite often for the cognitive and not the rest.
Yeah.
And my guess is you're helping them to be better people, and I'm sure that's reflecting in the work that your firm does. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, this was amazing just spending time with you, and I'm so honored to be the first formal podcast, and especially starting this new year, no better way to do it. And I would share the same sentiments with you. You are inspiring to me every time we get together, and I look forward to the future for us to continue to figure out new ways to do things that are going to impact people's lives.
Yep. Thank you, John. And I think you set the bar high as we have future guests. And thank you, because I can think of no better subject of starting the podcast with than self-mastery. Yeah. Because it is a journey. There is no destination. There's no day where I'm going to, or you will, or any of us will pop our legs up on our desk and go, yeah, I think I've arrived at the self-mastery thing. No, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Absolutely. I'll end with this quote that I heard years ago, and I wish I could attribute it to somebody, but this kind of sums it up when you think about self-mastery, I think, and leadership. a leader of one or a leader of many. If you can't lead one, you can't lead any.
Ooh, that's good. Well, John, that's a perfect then way to end. So at the end of each episode, after John and I are done, we're gonna share a quote and a visual. And the idea is that it'll create a brain bookmark and a thought prodder about our podcast subject. So it'll help further your learning. Something almost like why I love poetry is it makes me think deeper and I keep coming back to it and you keep rediscovering it, almost like taking a diamond and turning around and you see these beautiful vantage points. So our listeners, thank you. Be sure you subscribe, share the heck out of this with a lot of people. So subscribe to our channel, The Anatomy of Leadership, so that way you don't miss an episode in the future. And please tell people on Amazon about The Anatomy of Leadership as a book. It is not meant to be the Bible of leadership. It's meant to be more of the table of contents. And we're going to use these shows throughout the year. John has just set a great tone. We're going to have a lot of great guests throughout this year as we keep going deeper on this kind of meta framework that is the anatomy of leadership. And so let's all be the change that we wish to see in the world. Thanks for listening. And so here's our brain bookmark to close today's show.
What are you doing with yourself, for yourself, to make the best version of yourself? By John Locke. We develop as human beings from the bottom of the pyramid up. We become our best self from the top of the pyramid down. By John Locke.